The tow truck's cable snapped tight as fresh red paint slashed across my driveway. No parking fire, truck access, and the chemical smell burned my nose. A worker drilled a steel sign into my concrete while my car sat trapped behind wet zigzags. The HOA president stood at the curb with a clipboard, calm, efficient. "This is a fire truck staging lane now," she said. "Street parking. Effective immediately." I looked at the sign, the paint, the rushed bolts, and it hit me. This isn't safety. This is fake. She was inventing a fire lane on my driveway. I asked who approved it. She didn't answer. The tow driver revved. Neighbors filmed. I stepped closer, and she raised a finger. Touch anything, she said, and we escalate. As the hook slid under my axle, she leaned in, voice steady. "It's already filed," she said. And that's when I realized if she'd forged this, what else had she put on the books? The HOA president didn't ask permission, she redirected the crew. She waved the painter back to thicken the red zigzags, told the tow driver to hold position, and ordered a second metal sign bolted closer to my garage. Then she slid a laminated notice onto my windshield like a parking ticket. "Obstructing emergency access," she said flatly. Her name was Claire Wells, and she ran the association the way some people run a checkpoint, efficient, unquestioned, and allergic to discussion. She pointed at the fresh paint and announced my driveway was now a temporary fire truck staging lane, citing a bylaw number without producing a single permit. When I asked who approved it, she didn't answer. She just said "board action" and flicked her pen toward the tow truck. Claire didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She used procedure like a weapons safety language, urgent timelines, official-sounding labels, to end conversations before they started. Neighbors hovered at a distance, phones up, pretending they were just watching. I noticed something important she never said, which authority requested the fire lane, only that it was necessary. Her motive surfaced once clean and rehearsed. The HOA needed to meet parking ratios for a planned community expansion, and my driveway sat exactly where their math fell apart. She called it protection. I saw inventory. As the crew worked, Claire leaned in and lowered her voice. "This isn't personal," she said. "It's compliance." Then she delivered the line meant to shut me down completely. The board already moved this forward. That's when it clicked. Claire Wells wasn't enforcing safety, she was manufacturing it in daylight and daring anyone to challenge the paperwork. I tried to leave that afternoon just to reset my head. I made it as far as the end of the driveway before a yellow warning slapped against my windshield. Fire lane violation subject to tow. It hadn't even been 4 hours since they painted the lines. I got out and stared at the red zigzags, still glossy, still smelling like solvent. The steel sign cast a shadow across my garage door, the words, "Fire Truck Excess," stamped deep enough to last years. I peeled the sticker off the glass and felt the paper tear in my fingers. A security golf cart rolled up before I could take a second step. The driver didn't look at me, just at the paint. "You can't park here," he said. "HOA directive." "It's my driveway," I said. He shrugged. "Then don't use it." That was the tone now. Final. Scripted. Like they'd rehearsed it. By sunset, the tow truck came back. Same driver, same cable. He parked close enough that his bumper blocked my sidewalk and sat there idling a threat on wheels. Neighbors slowed their cars to look, then kept driving. One woman mouthed, "Sorry," and disappeared inside. No one said anything out loud. I walked to the curb and asked for a supervisor. The driver pointed at the red lines. "Fire lane," he said. "I tow on call." I didn't yell. I didn't touch the sign. I took photos, wide, shots, close-ups, timestamps. I filmed the truck, the paint, the lack of cones or barricades. When Claire Wells walked past with her clipboard, I asked her one last time for the permit number. She didn't stop. "You've been notified," she said. "Any interference will be documented." That night, I parked 3 blocks away and walked home in the dark, carrying groceries past my own useless garage. The official notice arrived the next morning by email CC'd to the entire HOA board. Fire safety, notice immediate compliance required. It was written like a legal memo. No greeting, no explanation, just declarations. My driveway was now designated as emergency access infrastructure, effective immediately. Non-compliance would result in escalating fines, towing, and further remedies. Attached was a map. It looked professional, clean lines, HOA letterhead, a bold red stripe labeled Fire Lane running straight through my property. What it didn't include was any county stamp permit number or fire department approval, just a legend and a signature block with Claire's name. I replied once. Short, calm. I asked for the permit, the approving authority, and the duration of the designation. The response came in the HOA app, public for everyone to see. Please refrain from hostile behavior, Claire wrote. This is a safety issue. The board has acted. Within an hour, another post followed, reminding residents that questioning emergency measures could put lives at risk. That was the shift. It wasn't just me anymore. It was the system closing ranks. By afternoon, the fines started. $250 per incident for obstructing emergency access, logged automatically each time my car appeared in the HOA camera feed parked legally on the street. They cited my pattern of resistance. They warned of towing if I attempted to use the driveway at all. I went to the clubhouse to speak in person. The doors were locked. A printed sign taped to the glass read, "Emergency Session Board Only." Through the window, I could see them sitting at the table. Claire at the head, papers spread out, calm faces, deciding things about my property without me in the room. That's when I understood they weren't confused. They were committed. I went to the county clerk the next morning. I didn't ask about fire lanes. I asked for my lot file. The clerk wheeled out a cart and dropped a folder thick enough to thud. Deeds, site plans, parking requirements. I spread them across a table under fluorescent lights and traced my finger along the original development map. There, it was clear as day. My driveway wasn't optional. It was required off-street parking for my house. The development approval hinged on it. Without that driveway, my lot didn't meet code. I flipped the page and felt my stomach tighten. A separate plan filed 6 months earlier showed a proposed community expansion, new amenities, more units, and a problem highlighted in red: insufficient parking. They were short, badly. The math only worked if they absorbed adjacent non-essential access, and the red stripe on my driveway suddenly made sense. This wasn't about safety, it was about numbers. I asked the clerk if any fire department request existed for my address. She checked. Nothing. No memo, no inspection, no emergency designation, no permit. Just then, something clicked cold and heavy in my chest. They hadn't misunderstood the rules. They'd fabricated them, painted urgency onto concrete, and dared anyone to challenge a fake fire lane because who argues with fire safety? I sat there longer than I needed to, staring at the map, realizing how close I'd come to losing a basic right to use my own property, not because of an accident, but because it was convenient. And if they'd done this to me quietly in daylight, how many other lines had they already redrawn? I didn't call a lawyer first. I called the fire department, not 911 administration. I kept my voice neutral and asked a simple question whether a fire truck staging lane had been requested or approved for my address. The pause on the line was long enough to hear a keyboard, then a sharper tone. "No, sir," the captain said. "There's no record of that." I emailed him photos of the red paint, the steel sign, the HOA map. He called back 10 minutes later. "Who put this in?" he asked. That question did the work for me. By noon, a fire marshal and a city inspector were scheduled to take a look. I didn't announce it. I didn't threaten. I kept collecting. Screenshots of fines, time-stamped photos of the tow truck idling, the HOA app posts where Claire framed doubt as danger. I packaged it clean and sent it to code enforcement, building inspection, and the county clerk, 3 doors that don't like being lied to. They arrived the next morning without sirens, a white city pickup, a fire marshal SUV, clipboards, not megaphones. Neighbors came out anyway, phones up, coffee mugs frozen mid-sip. The fire marshal walked the length of my driveway, knelt to measure the zigzags, and stood. "This is not a compliant fire lane," he said, "and it was never requested." The city inspector checked setbacks, then looked at the sign. "Unpermitted installation," he said, "on private property." Claire Wells appeared fast, clipboard tight to her chest. She tried to intercept. "This is HOA infrastructure," she said. "Emergency designation." The marshal didn't raise his voice. "Show me the request." She couldn't. A bright red notice went up on the mailbox cluster: "Stop work. Unpermitted safety markings." The inspector explained loud enough for everyone that the HOA faced daily fines until the markings were removed and the concrete restored. He added one more line that landed heavy: "False safety designations interfere with emergency response." Claire's face drained, then hardened. She said nothing. She didn't have to. The damage was already documented. That afternoon, I sent one email. Not to the city, not to the board, to the neighborhood. I attached the clerk's map, showing my driveway as required parking. The fire department's email confirming no request existed. Photos of the red paint measured against code. Screenshots of the HOA app posts, where safety had been used as a shield. I didn't editorialize. I labeled each file and let the facts talk. The replies came fast, then faster. A board member messaged me privately. "I never approved this," he wrote. Claire told us it was mandated. Another followed with a PDF, an internal memo instructing staff to move forward before inspections. That was the moment the floor dropped out. The HOA announced an emergency meeting for that evening. Mandatory attendance, no comments submitted in advance. The agenda had one item, fire safety compliance review. Claire posted once more in the app. There's a lot of misinformation circulating, she wrote. Let's address this calmly. When I arrived at the clubhouse, the room was packed, standing room only. Neighbors who had avoided eye contact now sat forward, arms crossed, waiting. Claire took the microphone and smiled like this was still hers. We're here to clear the air, she said. Some residents don't understand how emergency designations work. I sat down and opened my folder, because at that moment, with the fire marshal in the back row and the city inspector leaning against the wall, I realized something else had changed. This wasn't about my driveway anymore. This was about whether the HOA could invent danger to take property and whether anyone would stop them once it was done in public. And Claire Wells was about to find out how thin fake authority gets when real ones walk into the room. The emergency meeting didn't open with a gavel. It opened with Claire Wells standing at the podium, microphone already live, smiling like she still owned the room. We're here because emotions ran ahead of facts, she said. Fire safety isn't optional. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones were already up. Claire clicked to a slide showing the same red stripe cutting across my driveway. This designation was necessary, she continued, and it was handled responsibly. That's when the door at the back opened. The fire marshal stepped in, first uniform, crisp eyes scanning. Behind him, the city inspector followed, folder tucked under his arm. The room shifted, chairs scraped, whispers stopped. Claire's smile froze just for a beat before she recovered. This is an HOA meeting, she said. You weren't scheduled. The marshal didn't sit. We're not here to listen, he said. We're here to correct the record. Claire tried to keep control. If you'll let me finish. No, he said. We won't. Silence landed hard. The city inspector opened his folder and held up a document. There is no fire department request for this address, he said. No permit, no inspection, no approval. He placed it on the table, then another, and another. The marshal pointed at the screen. Those markings are non-compliant, he said. They were installed without authority. Labeling a private driveway as emergency access without our involvement is not a misunderstanding, it's a misrepresentation. Claire tried to interject. The inspector cut in. The board cannot invent safety infrastructure. I stood then not to speak, just to hand over my folder. The clerk's map, the required parking designation, the expansion plan showing the shortage circled in red, the email where Claire wrote, "Move forward before inspections." The marshal flipped one page and looked up. This explains the urgency, he said. The room exhaled as one. Phones zoomed. Someone in the back said, "She lied." Another voice added, "She used fire safety to steal parking." Claire's hands tightened around the podium. "This is being taken out of context," she said. "I acted to protect the community." The inspector shook his head. "You exposed the community." Claire's voice rose. "You can't just invalidate board action in front of residents." The marshal stepped closer. "Watch us." He turned to the room. "Effective immediately, all false safety markings must be removed tonight. Continued obstruction will result in fines and referral for further action." The board chair cleared his throat. "Madam President," he said, not meeting her eyes, "I'm calling for a vote to suspend your authority pending review." Claire laughed once, sharp, disbelieving. "You can't do that." Hands went up, one by one, fast. The motion passed. The inspector slid a notice across the table. "You're no longer authorized to direct work," he said. "Any further interference will be documented." Claire looked around, searching for allies. She found cameras instead. As the marshal turned to leave, he paused beside me. "Your driveway is not a fire lane," he said, "loud enough for everyone." It never was. And, just like that, the power she'd painted onto my concrete peeled off publicly, permanently, while the room watched it happen. No one rushed the door after the vote. The room stayed still, like everyone needed a second to recalibrate what power felt like without Claire Wells holding it. A neighbor I'd only ever nodded to leaned over and whispered, "I thought I was the only one she did this to." Another woman raised her phone and quietly deleted a draft post she'd been afraid to send for months. The tension that had lived in the room, tight shoulders, crossed arms, held breath, eased all at once. People spoke up, not loudly but clearly. Apologies came without speeches. A board member stood and said, "We should have asked more questions." The fire marshal remained near the back, answering practical ones, grounding the moment. I felt the weight leave my chest, not relief, exactly more like balance returning. For the first time since the red paint appeared, I wasn't bracing for the next escalation. I could stand still and listen, and the room did the same. The city inspector put his phone on speaker and read the outcome as it arrived, clean and procedural. The HOA was cited for unpermitted construction, false safety markings, and obstruction of required parking penalties stacking into the mid-five figures, effective immediately. A compliance order required removal of all markings and signage that night with concrete restoration scheduled under city supervision. Any attempt to redesignate emergency access would now require written fire department initiation, third-party verification, and a recorded community vote. The board chair accepted the notice, voice steady. Then the inspector added one more line evenly delivered. This file is being referred for further review. No one asked what that meant. They didn't need to. The fire marshal confirmed the final point. My driveway was restored to private use, protected by code, and any future interference would trigger enforcement without warning. The system had spoken, and it didn't raise its voice. While the meeting wound down, phones buzzed. A contractor confirmed availability. The board chair nodded to me and said, "You can stay and watch." Outside, under the clubhouse lights, a crew arrived with grinders and solvent. The red zigzags vanished in gray dust. The steel sign came off with a hollow clang. When the last bolt hit the bucket, the space in front of my garage looked ordinary again, plain concrete, nothing dramatic. Inside, neighbors drifted past, the windows quieter, now watching work instead of conflict. Someone brought water, someone else held the door. When the crew finished, I walked out, started my car, and rolled forward, no pause, no permission, into my own garage. The door came down behind me, steady and final. Through the wall, I could hear the clubhouse emptying, voices low normal. The night settled the way it always should have. Real fire lanes save lives. The one they painted was only meant to save control, and it couldn't survive daylight.